Hello and welcome to WPLS Live. I am Principal Lee, and tonight I am joined by Mr. Bailey, our 6th and 7th grade science teacher, and also Sam, one of our 8th grade ambassadors. Good evening, Sam.
Good evening, Miss Lee.
And good
Thank you for
evening,
having
Mr.
me.
Bailey.
Good evening, Miss Lee.
Thanks again for being here. We're really glad that we get an opportunity to discuss this very important topic. This topic of respect actually happens to also be one of our values here at a school. And so as a school, we have different values, and one of them being respect. Respect to us is listening to each other, it's acknowledging each other's differences and our different points of view, and working through those differences because we're all made differently, and we do that with calmness and civility. We know that respect can mean a lot of different things to different people. So we want to hear first a definition from some of our younger kids at our school, from our first graders. So listen to this definition from our first graders.
My name is Taffy. My name is Noah. Respect is important because if they respect you, then you will get respected. Miss Willis said that we had to make a poster about respect with a sentence on the top. Because when you walk quietly in the hall, other people are learning, and if you're loud, you're going to disturb them.
And how do you show respect to your teacher, Mrs. Willis?
By not talking while the teacher's talking.
So those were our wonderful first graders and how they defined respect. And respect can be one of those things that are rather hard to define. It's one of those words that are rather abstract and can mean different things to different people. So I want to start first with Sam. Sam, what would be your definition of respect?
My personal definition of respect is essentially that you show others that you care, you're understanding and considerate of their situation, and that you're also welcome to new ideas.
And I see, Sam, behind you, you have some words there in Latin. Can you tell us what that is?
So the phrase in Latin above me means respect to all. I picked it because it is a core value, because respect is a core value of our student ambassadors, and also because it's a social emotional learning value.
Yeah, I noticed that right away when you had that in your background. I was curious to know what that meant, and I like that phrase of respect for all. Mr. Bailey, what would be your definition of respect?
Well, when I think about respect, my definition of respect for me means that I have to go back and I have to ask myself, well, the question like, how does Jesus define respect, and how does that play out for all of us? In Matthew chapter 22, verses 37 through 38, Jesus says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. This is the first and greatest commandment." Respect starts with love and admiration towards God. And then in the following verse, Jesus defines it in a way for us to understand for each other. Matthew chapter 22, verses 39 through 40. And the second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Essentially, it's the golden rule, which is love and treat others as you want to be treated. A better way to phrase this is to love people as Jesus does.
Two of the key words that I pick up from you, Mr. Bailey, and also Sam in your definition is the idea of both care and also love. And it has to do with treating people, right? Including even ourselves in a way that makes people feel those two things, right? They feel cared for, they feel valued, and we also know that it comes with understanding each other's feelings, their wishes, their rights, and just knowing that each person is uniquely made. And it's something that's not just solely based on what a person has achieved and their accomplishments, but it's the respect respects that they are also human and have the same design as being made in God's image. So that's a little bit of a definition of respect that we can kind of work with. So now the next question we want to answer is, so in a school setting, because we are at Westport Lutheran School, what are some ways that students feel respected? Sam?
Oh, I think that students feel respected, when, for example, when their peers help them, for example, on assignments and stuff, as well as when they get compliments or feedback from their teachers. I feel like they also feel respected when they get some sort of understanding from teachers about missing or late assignments, as well as when others are mindful of their presence.
Tell me more, Sam, about that last phrase that you described, being mindful of their presence. What does that mean to you?
That means to me as acknowledging that they are there and, respectfully, for example, detracting from the first grade video. One of the examples they gave was walking in the hallway quietly. So when you walk in the hallway quietly, you aren't detracting from you aren't you aren't interrupting the learning from other classes. So that is a way that students can feel respected because they aren't getting cheated on their learning.
I like how you phrased it, just being mindful, right, of another person's presence. And sometimes, I confess to this, like it's really sometimes just all about me sometimes. And I'm not really acknowledging the presence of others or what they may be feeling or experiencing as a result of what I'm doing. Mr. Bailey, going to you now, how do teachers like to feel respected?
Well, I'll be honest, like no teacher is perfect, including me. But at the same time, one of the best ways but we do care about our students. We try our best and we love and support our students. And one of the easiest ways to respect a teacher is to obey our rules. Like if we have like, hey, don't talk when we're talking, don't run around the classroom, don't scream in excitement, please don't answer before, like just don't blurt out answers. I know those seem like abstract and like why would you this would be wrong, we're getting the right answers, but they also have a certain place because it allows other students to grow. Because if someone is just blurting out answers or talking over the teacher, then it hinders other students from learning. So there's a core value there that is really it's really hinged on other students learning. So when the teachers are not being respected, it's taken away from other students because we're not allowed to teach in our fullest capacity as teachers. The most important thing for students is that they can show respect by also participating, caring for our school environment, like picking up trash or just making sure it's not dirty. And most importantly, respecting themselves. I think a lot of times we think if we just respect the teacher, that means following their rules. But the reason we ask you to follow our rules is because it teaches you to respect yourself in a way that allows you to grow. I think for me, that's incredibly important.
Something we experience at school, of course, is that we may have different understandings of what respect is. So I think it's really important, Mr. Bailey, that you shared about how teachers feel respected, and also Sam, how you shared about how students feel respected. What do you guys think as far as what can be done to maybe connect and bridge sometimes that divide between teachers and students of how respect is either received or given? That makes sense? Because I don't know, Sam, is that in your experience? Do you feel like there's a mismatch sometimes of what you perceive as respect versus what a teacher might perceive?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I feel like sometimes there can be a bit of miscommunication or just personal disconnect from, our goals and the teacher's goals. But I feel like if we can maintain a clean and sterile learning environment in both the figurative and literal sense, I feel like, we can bridge that disconnect.
Yeah, Mr. Bailey, I would think that sometimes students don't know that we are really for them. Like I feel that maybe we as teachers can do better on affirming with students, and as you mentioned, we lay down our expectations for students, and there's certain ways that we want them to respond and act in a classroom, but maybe there's more we can do to affirm our students that we are really for them and for their good.
Yeah, I think there is a lot. I think sometimes, it's easy to get frustrated. I'll be the first to admit it's easy to get frustrated at students who are not who a teacher doesn't feel respected by. And I think one of the best ways for teachers, and I know this, if I'm going to speak to myself on this, is to show grace. Because I often think we can be too hardline that we miss out on showing grace and compassion to us students as well. And I think that's really key and critical. And I don't think we get the full scope of what's going on our students' life. And I think making sure our classroom is warm and inviting and also open for students to share what's going on. One of the things I really want my students to know is that they can come and talk to me anytime if they ever want to actually just sit and talk and share with what they're going through. I'm open to that. I want to help them. And I think sometimes we don't even do enough to build students up in a way that they see themselves. I think sometimes we have students that see themselves, well, I've been this way for years. I've maybe not the best achieving student, or maybe I've been labeled as a bad kid by other teachers. And I think when we have that thing happen to us, I think we have to affirm our kids, we don't see you as that. We see you as people that are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of the Almighty God. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, you mentioned that idea of grace, which is actually one of our other school values. And I like that you said we're not perfect. I'm certainly not perfect, and I know our students are not perfect either. And we really just want to make attempts to come alongside each other, right, in this whole teaching and learning endeavor. And our goal as a whole school, right, is to make sure that students are achieving, and to let them know also that, hey, this is what we want for you, that we want you to be confident in who you are. That's our vision, and in your God-given design. So as we talk a little bit more about what it looks like in the teaching and learning endeavor, we also want to think about what respect looks like in the classroom. And so we're going to take a look at how that plays out in our first grade classroom.
What do we do to show respect, Andrew?
You don't talk when they're trying to talk about your picture.
Yeah, it can be very distracting. Absolutely. Okay, another one, Taffy. What else do you do?
Eye contact.
Say it louder.
Eye contact.
Eye contact. You make eye contact with the person who's speaking so that they know that you're listening. I love it. Okay, Olivia?
Listen carefully.
Yeah, you want to learn something new, don't you?
So as we watch our first graders now talk a little bit about what respect looks like to each other in the classroom, we want to reflect a little bit more personally. And so Mr. Bailey has an opportunity now to be able to share a little bit more with us, not necessarily from the teaching side of things, but in his own individual journey as a learner and how he grew to embrace the ways that God has made him. Mr. Bailey?
Yeah, so my journey of respect for learning really starts when I learned how to respect and accept the person God Jesus made me to be. So to be honest, I'll just go ahead and say this. I have Asperger's syndrome, or what is referred to as high functioning autism. So I have a learning disability. I have a disability. I am very aware of this. And one of my deepest struggles in my life has been acceptance. I always seem to struggle with the fear of people not accepting me as a person. Asperger's play into this fear, because if I'm honest, my Asperger's made me feel uniquely different from generally everyone else in many ways. A couple examples of this are sometimes when I am overstimulated, I can say wild and crazy things without meaning to. I have an extremely hard, hold on, sorry. We have a cat that is going crazy at the same time.
We'll respect the cat.
Sorry about that. He does this all the time with my wife in her mini Zoom conferences. Alrighty. I always seem to struggle with fear of people not accepting me as a person. Asperger's put into that fear because, if I'm honest, my Asperger's had made me feel uniquely different from generally everyone else in many ways. A couple of examples of this are sometimes when I feel overstimulated, I can feel wild and I can say wild and crazy things without meaning to. I have an extremely hard time controlling the volume of my voice to the point where it's hard for me to, where it was hard for people to hear me. It is also hard for me to look people in the face. In fact, I really can't look at people in the face. And it's not that I'm trying to be disrespectful by not looking at you in the face or individuals in the face. It's just I really can't because it hurts me. And that's just a few things. My Asperger's also caused me to have high anxiety about things. So when I feel that I'm not accepted, then I start to worry that I'll be alone. Um, Let me just go ahead and throw this out there. Loneliness scares me a lot because I don't want to be alone. I want to be loved. I want to be cared for, and I want people to want to be around me. That's my fear of not being accepted accumulated into the idea that if I am not accepted, then thus I will be rejected and alone for the rest of my life. Therefore, I had a hard time accepting my own Asperger's for the longest time because I believed that my Asperger's itself was a curse. I believed that my Asperger's would cause me to be rejected and alone if people found out. All the quirks of having Asperger's, such as the difficulties in controlling the volume of my voice and not being able to look people in the face, were nothing compared with the fear of being labeled as that kid with Asperger's. What I mean by that is it horrifies me at just the thought that I could be labeled as a person with Asperger's and be rejected by people around me for that reason. Unfortunately, I think people tend to see all the negative sides of a disorder and judge that person with that disorder before they even meet or take the time to get to know someone with that disorder. What makes that notion worse is it creates a preconceived notion within people with disorders that they are worthless or cursed. It's almost like telling a cancer patient that they are going to die, even if the cancer is just in their little finger and it can be taken out very simply. In a lot of ways, this is part of the reason I had such a hard time accepting my Asperger's, because of the negative stereotypes that the Asperger's can bring, and I personally did not want to be associated with the stereotype. For the longest time, I was completely terrified of people finding out that I had Asperger's. I remember during my middle and high school years breaking down in tears several times because people had found out that I had Asperger's. And again, I literally thought I was a monster. Therefore, I tried my best to hide my Asperger's. However, in the end, no matter how hard I tried, I could not hide my Asperger's. In addition, there was still this reality that people thought I was strange, or as some people would say, off. That's a kind of a fun way in the South that people say people that are strange. Yet, although being thought of as strange or off hurt, it felt better in a lot of ways than people realizing that I had Asperger's. The thing that finally changed my outlook on my Asperger's was God. Jesus has been my source of strength and has been since I was 8 years old. However, Asperger's had always been a stumbling block for me in my walk of faith. Like, I didn't want people to know about it. Like, I'm walking with Jesus and living my life, but this is hidden. Like, it's something in the closet that I don't want to come out. It is something that horrifies me, and I couldn't accept me being fearfully and wonderfully made yet. Yet this all changed in the summer of 2009. Because God changed my heart and my view on Asperger's. During the summer of 2009, I was working as a summer missionary for the North American Mission Board in Fresno, California. And during that summer, I lived for a couple of weeks with a pastor named Tom Sims. Pastor Tom is a little quirky himself, but he is one of the best people I've known. And honestly, he's one of the best people I've ever met. Sorry, I get a little emotional talking about this. And so I shared with him one night that I had Asperger's, and I'll never forget what Tom said to me the moment I shared with him about the reality of my Asperger's. Tom said, "Andrew, your story is great, but God gave you Asperger's for a reason. You need to use it. Your Asperger's is not a curse, it is a gift from God." When I heard those words, I realized for the first time God had lovingly created me with Asperger's. I realized my shame for my weakness was not something to be ashamed of at all. You see, the beautiful thing about God is that he says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in your weakness." I was not able to accept and get over my shame of having Asperger's until I realized that God had created me to have it. That God had was not ashamed that I have Asperger's, but in fact loves me and accepts me because of it. The reality is, even though we are, as Tim Keller says, more sinful and flawed we than we could ever dare believe, at the very same time, we are more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than we could ever dare hope. The reason I am able to say all the things that I am right now and I'm upfront and honest with people about my Asperger's is simply because of Jesus. The fact is, Jesus is constantly there reminding me, and not just me, but all of us, that we are loved and accepted by Him. Do I still struggle with fear of people accepting me? Yeah, I do. I think every person does. But I know that is part of being a broken human being. And the reality is, I might struggle with that fear the rest of my life. However, the beautiful truth is that God sees all that I am and says, I love you and accept you despite all that you are. And that no one, and that one day when the shadow of this world is over, all of my struggles and your struggles will cease with the return of Christ and the restoration of all things. Therefore, I rejoice in having Asperger's because I am more loved and accepted by Jesus than I could ever imagine. So, for those of you, and especially my students who learn unique ways or have problems accepting yourself, you are more loved and accepted by Jesus than you can ever imagine. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey, for sharing with us your journey. I'm going to bring Sam back on here, and we'd love to ask him a few questions, follow-up questions from what you shared. So first off, the key word that stood out to me as you were sharing, Mr. Bailey, is this idea of acceptance. And I think when we think about it in connection with respect, we think about it, of course, in accepting others, but it sounds like for you that it was a lot about accepting yourself and specifically accepting how God has created you and designed you to be. What advice would you have for others who are, because you're right. Like I'm a people pleaser. I'll admit it. It really sucks when there's criticism or rejection, and I don't know how to fully live in that acceptance that I have in Jesus. What kind of advice would you have for students, parents, even who are struggling with this idea of acceptance of themselves?
Yeah, I think for people that are struggling with acceptance of themselves, I think you first have to look at who Jesus is and why he came. Jesus didn't come so that we can be perfect little people. He came to save the broken. Christianity is not about living in this perfect little it's not about a perfect little niche where you have your perfect little family, your perfect little house, your perfect little job. It's about loving people as Jesus does and giving glory to Jesus. That's what it's about. And oftentimes we put those characteristics together, like you have to have everything perfect, when that's not what Jesus came for. He came to save us, knowing that we were broken. And I think for people to really accept themselves, I think they really need to understand that we are flawed, but it's okay, because if we were perfect, then we wouldn't need to be saved. There wouldn't be any grace. There would be no compassion. All the beautiful things about God is made known through our brokenness. And in that, God works through us in big ways. I mean, I shouldn't be a teacher. I mean, I have dyslexia, I have Asperger's, which should make me have a huge disadvantage when I'm teaching, yet I teach. And I think that's because the work of the Holy Spirit and God speaking within me and God's movement and to be glorified. So I think it's incredibly important for people who might struggle with accepting themselves to see who God has made them to be and see how Jesus has made you. And that's fearfully and wonderfully made.
Sam, I'm curious, just from your perspective as a student, I know Mr. Bailey was so great to be courageous and vulnerable with all of us on his journey. How well do you think, as far as students, I'm talking about your classmates, really know each other to the depth of where you're like understanding a completely different side? Like I know sometimes as students, you just sort of operate, you're competitive because you want to do well, but how much do you think students really know of each other's story of like struggle or just that need to be accepted? Do you think that's something that's shared among students?
I really don't feel like it's shared among students. I mean, it's a vulnerability. I mean, personally, I don't share my weaknesses that often, so I feel like it's not shared that often unless they're like really close friends. But other than that, it's really there's no like deep secrets or deep challenges that are, given to everyone or told to everyone. I think it's more a personal issue that they feel.
What do you think is the fear behind maybe opening
I
up inside?
I think the fear is that others will ridicule them. Like Mr. Bailey said, he was afraid of people, separating him off because, he was considered off, but I think it's less extreme in most cases, but I think it just opens up a vulnerability that, no one wants to share because, it makes you look weak and no one wants to look weak at all.
Yeah, you bring up a really important point. I know, Mr. Bailey, that's insightful for us as teachers, right, as an administrator. And Sam, I'm talking to you as well as all other students. There's something that we can, that human connection to somebody's vulnerability and their openness to be vocal or share that with us. There's something that really resonates, because we all know deep down inside, right? I know for myself, for example, I'll just give a short example. I went to seminary and I felt highly inadequate, because here are all these wannabe pastors and they knew the Bible in and out. And I was just trying to see if I can measure up to their worth. But when one thing I really appreciated as I was going to seminary was that I loved when, and may seem odd, but when the professors would actually break down and cry, and they didn't cry often, but when you get a peek into the fact that they're human and that they actually themselves are internalizing what they're saying, like that spoke to me more than the infinite amount of knowledge that they could pass down through their education and what they've experienced in their academia or academics. So I don't know, Mr. Bailey, would you agree? Is there something about um, acceptance and respect that comes when actually you're more open and vulnerable with your shortcomings?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more that comes aligned when you're open and vulnerable. Sam, you have a you have a Latin word for respect on the background, but if you think about the Greek word hero, it actually comes from one that suffers. So in the Greek mythology or any mythology, the hero is the one that suffers. You see their struggles, you see how they go to get to the point A to point B, and I think we are able to resonate with them because we are able to see what they've gone through in order to learn from them. And I know with my own journey, I could have acted, oh, I'm like this super cool guy and I'm totally normal, but it doesn't help anyone. Um, I'll share some stories from, if it's okay, I'll share a story really quickly. I used to do missionary work in Haight-Ashbury, and I did a lot of work with homeless runaway hippies. And, I couldn't, if I had gone to them and I had just been like, yeah, I'm this great Jesus person. Yeah, look at me. They wouldn't have talked to me. And the only way I could get them to talk to me was to actually be honest with them and to share my weakness with them. And there's several times where I would go and I would share, they would ask me about who I was as a person. I would just go ahead and tell them like all the stuff that I've gone through and the sufferings that I went through. And instead of them like, oh, that's weird, they actually were like, oh, that's like intense. And it allowed me to share the gospel with them and build relationships with them. Um, as a Christian, those things are critical for us. Like, Jesus doesn't come in the form of this super great, mighty king who he was expected to be. He came in the form of a servant. He came to die for us, not in some glory. I mean, he was glorified in dying for us, but he died humiliated. And yet, this person who was utterly humiliated in front of his friends, his close ones, was the person that changed the world the most in the last 2,000 years. And I think we value success to a point that we forget who we are. And we can't change the world or anything unless we accept who we are and embrace our weakness and then let the Lord use that for his good. So that's how I would say. Sorry, I went on a little tangent.
No, that's great. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Sam, do you have any suggestions for us as teachers or even as students of what can we do to help students to be more trusting, to be vulnerable, like that, to have that as a value, to understand that that's a way to more deeply respect one another? Any ideas or suggestions?
I mean, really, I think the number one thing is just to, I think other teachers, actually all teachers and all of their peers should just be understanding, maybe give feedback maybe when it's appropriate, but just really being understanding, not making fun of, illnesses or anything, just really understanding, maybe even complimenting, I just really think that positivity and understanding goes a long way.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Positivity and understanding and knowing that each other is being heard, I think is an important thing that I hear from students often is that we listen well. That was one of our first graders, right? About how we demonstrate respect. And ultimately, we want for all of us to have a environment and a place where we feel safe and secure. And some may ask, well, what's the value of having respect or acceptance, right? Or even focusing on these social emotional learning topics. And we believe it's important because when you feel accepted and when you feel the respect of others, or you have your own self-respect and self understanding of self-worth, you actually begin to thrive and grow and be more confident and learn more even. I mean, I don't know how you feel, Sam, in your experience as a learner, these many years that you've been in a school setting. Like, what helps you feel accepted and confident in a classroom setting to want to learn? Is it the fact that teachers are hearing you out or giving you opportunities? What are some things that you've experienced in your schooling that may help you to have that confidence to want to risk more, like take on that challenge math problem, and be able to increase your learning?
Uh well, I've had a compared to others, since I've had a rough time. My first school, you know, it closed down because of the archdiocese. So then I went to this private school, and then I got bullied, and then I went to West Portal. So I think the one thing that really helps is experiences, but also that the teachers are welcoming. They aren't like mean in their appearance or talk. They're just, you know, overall positivity, as I said earlier, overall positivity and understanding. I think, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you landed in a spot, here at West Portal where you could feel that acceptance and love. And being bullied, that's a whole other separate topic. Certainly, that takes away somebody's value and worth, and therefore, of course, does not demonstrate that respect. And I think with that, I see that in you, Sam. Your hunger for learning and your desire to continue to grow and learn and be curious about things. That's something I know that comes with you knowing that you're accepted and able to do that in an environment that's going to support and facilitate that. I want to end with those thoughts because I think it's important that we all understand that our school and our vision is that we see our students to be confident in who they are in their God given design and to be able to go out into the world and be able to learn and to serve and ultimately to lead. And we wish that for you, Sam, as you leave West Point Lutheran and you graduate just in a matter of less than a couple of months, and that you find yourself in a place where you know who you are and you continue to build on those understandings of who you know you were made to be, and that you're going to go out and make a difference. And I know I speak for not only myself, Mr. Bailey, but also the rest of our staff and faculty, that that is our prayer for all of you, that you would really embrace that. And as we talk more about the different ways in which we can demonstrate respect, it's, an ongoing thing since it's a value of ours. We want to continue to open that dialogue of how we can create an environment where everyone feels secure and able to be who they are and accepted for who they are. And so I know that's going to take a long time, beyond Sam, the time that you have with us here at Westboro Lutheran. But I want to thank you for your contributions, for what you do for our school in that regard, and also Mr. Bailey for sharing your story, and also all of our teachers and how they share their stories and create that positivity in the classroom that Sam described. Let's continue this dialogue, and we look forward to more opportunities for individual conversations about what respect can look like. Until then, thank you again for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again.